With God, there is always more. More love, more life, more freedom. Welcome to Zoe's Exploring More with Michael Thompson. C.S. Lewis once wrote, "Our Heavenly Father has provided many delightful inns for us along our journey, but He takes great care to see that we do not mistake any of them for home." Join me and the team as we explore the kingdom together, discovering the deep truths and offering encouragement for the journey. There is always more. Welcome, friends and allies, to the Exploring More podcast, and it's 2021 version, isn't it?
We're only a couple weeks in.
And this is part two of a two-part series on the new year, for New Year's, Godspeed.
Godspeed, right.
The pace of being known. Last week, we talked about this video that's actually 4 or 5 years old on Vimeo, titled Godspeed, The Pace of Being Known. So we invite you to watch that and catch up with us in terms of how God's moving, how He's using that piece, how He's partnering with Pastor Matt. Is he Anglican? I think he's an Anglican priest.
I think so, because he's married with children, so it's not Catholic.
And a trip that he is invited to take to Scotland for working on his education, his degree, his doctorate, and finding a pace there.
A pace and a parish.
And a parish,
group of folks.
And a life. He says in the documentary how he found his life, how God snuck up on him.
Yeah, no doubt.
In that whole process. And we believe that that's true, that that's what God has done to us and will do to us, that sneaking up with good intention, with redemption in mind, with unveiling and with inviting. And so I ended the last session of the series, Godspeed, the first one, with this word for the year and how directionally God might be with us and how we might be missing it, right? Because of busyness.
Yeah, you started the last episode with a Soren Kierkegaard quote, "Life can only be understood looking backwards, but it has to be lived moving forwards." And it occurred to me as you shared that, I wonder if so much of the reason that we have to look back to understand is we've been going too fast, right? And we're way out ahead of where we need to be. And if we walked at a slower pace, this Godspeed pace, maybe we wouldn't get so far out in front of ourselves before we gain understanding.
Yeah. Robin has this journal practice at night. It reminds me of flossing. You know, it's just one of those things that I should probably do that. But she's got like this 1-minute journal, and it's the end of a day. And you just write 3 or 4 words that would capture that day. And what happens is she collects days, and as she collects weeks, she really does see what God's done. Then, because it's a short journal, you hang on to this thing, which whoever invented it is not selling a lot of journals because it's made so that the next year's below it and the next year's below it. And so you can see words from last year, the momentum of a year at a glance. And what's happening and what's going on currently, it invites the journaler to see. One of the things I love about Google Photos now, I get these things that just come up.
Memories.
It actually bothers me that it can do this.
Right.
It's amazing, right?
Yeah.
The way that it can organize my photos and give me a slideshow. But it'll be 2011. It'll be 2009. It'll be 2014. And they'll be, remember this?
Yep. Sherry and I share a Google photo account, and so we see them come up, and we've been experiencing that too, and what a great day that was, or wow, that was a really hard day, or...
I send them to my family because they land on me, like we were talking about last episode, The Sound of Music landed on me, and there's story there and an invitation. Same with these photos. It's an amazing thing to be wooed, like Kierkegaard said, to remember. So what if we aren't looking back? That's the crime that we're talking about within this context is if you don't look back, if you don't reflect, if you don't remember, if you aren't taking into account more than yesterday, but can begin to pray, ask God, so what are you up to as you father me in this season of my life, in these circumstances in my life? Again, questions like that have to be met in a place of solitude. They have to be met in a slowing down, right? Which is the more intimate dinner? The drive-through or the candlelight.
Yeah, and you can't have a conversation with someone as you're driving by and they're sitting on a park bench. You're like, hey, God, what's up today? You know what I mean? You just can't operate that way. Intimacy is not found there.
Yeah, and the drilling down, the mining down versus the moving forward. There's your tension.
Mm-hmm.
And we get to live in both because the next day's coming. Nothing wrong with a schedule and a plan. Yeah, having some goals or chores or appointments for a day or a week. I'm not saying that. But when that schedule runs you,
Yeah, not good.
you're living in a lane called busy.
Yeah.
And it's not good for the heart. It's not good for the soul. It's not good for intimacy.
Yeah, that makes me think, Michael, you were talking about drilling down and going deeper in the video Godspeed. They actually interview some monks.
Benedictine.
Yeah, part of the
monks.
Benedictine order. And there's a Benedictine concept called stabilitas, which, I guess now we know where the word stability comes from. It's a Latin root. But the concept of stabilitas is that you are here, you stay here, and you go deeper here.
Yeah.
Is what brings stability to your life. And when I heard that, what I heard was that's what intimacy with God means.
Mm-hmm.
Now, we can't all be Benedictine monks and live in the same monastery your whole life until you die. However, we can look at our intimacy with God in that way. With God, his beloved son, right? There's some identity things and some orientation that you need to get to understand.
Experience, yeah.
And experience God's
yeah.
love for you and your belovedness as his son or daughter. But then it's you stay here with him and you go deeper. Instead of just because there's a new year, we don't need to have a new word.
Right.
Vulnerability's been mine for 4 years. It might be 5.
It's fascinating.
So because I can sense that God is not done with that in me yet. And so I'm staying there until I feel like it's over.
Yeah. And when you get your diploma in vulnerability, you get to hang it there on the wall. It's something accomplished. Like, okay, now I can practice this. I'm not being introduced. I'm not going deeper. Although those are really important things, to learn patience, to learn this slowness that God is inviting me to. I'm not embarrassed to say I'm really looking forward to it. I've been working on a book the last year. It looks like it'll be released in May called King Me. And so most of my mornings, most every morning are 6:30. If I don't get up by then, the dogs are ready. They're getting me up. So get them out, get coffee, do a little bit of quiet settling. Sometimes I listen to something that is running at that 3 miles per hour, brings my heart into alignment with God. And then I begin to work or to write. But I think what I really feel happens is I begin to get in touch in that space of my thoughts, my heart, God's thoughts, and we begin to craft. We begin to work. What is this written piece that's going to be one day unveiled and given to many, many others, I hope, that would find time to encounter God within those paragraphs and pages of King Me. And I think for my heart's longing, SJ, and why I had to write King Me had so much to do with the need and desire that I have, and we've talked about this, that I believe men have and women, to be validated, to be initiated, to be called up, to be freed up, to learn the ways of the kingdom, the rhythms of grace, as Corinthians says in the Message version. Slow down, have a rest with me, Jesus says. Come to me all who are weary and heavy burdened, and I will give you rest. The Message version says, hey, come slow down, come get away with me, and I'll teach you how to rest. I'll teach you the ways of grace, right? The rhythms of grace, and untangle you from the world and the pace of the world. This is, unfortunately, for so long, SJ, this is more of the oil change approach. I've seen the odometer, it's time. And I always feel this way. I just had that done.
Right. I just took a weekend away. I just had a day off. I just had a couple hours to myself.
The odometer's counting it.
The odometer's counting it. That's right. And so what you're promoting there? Should we rely on the odometer? Or should we maybe be a little more free?
I think, yes, we should be more free. But the odometer is telling us something. How far you've traveled in what amount of time. And if the date on that oil change sticker up there is last month, you've been moving.
Yeah.
You've been putting the miles on.
Right.
So what if there was an odometer on our heart?
Mm-hmm.
What if there was an invitation here's the sticker. And to get away, to find ways to get away, to be with God. I think that's what Godspeed is. I didn't find it convicting. I found it extremely inviting and affirming.
Intriguing. You can live this way.
For our redemptive community and the way that we long to live and desire to live, Godspeed is taking stuff that we've actually discovered ourselves, but they put it in a very nice, very appropriate documentary that I'm ready to sign on and say, yeah, this is required watching for the Christ apprentice.
Yeah.
For the man who wants to move at the kingdom pace. You think of that 25 mile per hour school zone. What if the speed limit in the kingdom is not 80, 90, 100 miles per hour? What if the speed limit is 3 miles per hour?
Yeah.
And that's where I feel like, we want to be engaging, but not just in the ministry or the mission. If we're right, we believe at Zoe, the ministry and the mission is intimacy with God and others. Love God, love others.
You can't have that at 70 miles an hour, as we've said. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I love that you brought up the book King Me Too, Michael, because as one that was recently affirmed as a good king and a learning king at my 50th birthday at the end of 2020, what I'm recognizing about this stage of life is it is a little bit slower. Life isn't necessarily slower, but the invitation is to move through life and at life in a more slow, deliberate intentional way.
I'm with you.
Yeah.
I'm with you.
So whereas in my 20s, I was ready to lop off heads. I'm judge, jury, executioner. Boom. We're moving. We're making decisions. We're setting them up. We're knocking them down. We're taking this next hill. Now it's more, so tell me about that. What's going on with that? I actually managed to pull this off recently. I had a fairly substantial purchase to make. And maybe for you listeners, maybe for you, Michael, you have heard your dad say to you or someone say to you, if you have a substantial purchase to make, whatever it might be, a car or a house, go investigate it, spend 24 hours, and then go back. And if you still feel like you should move forward,
for a while.
Exactly. Walk away from it, come back to it. And I actually managed to do that recently. I've known that in the back of my head that it was a good practice to engage in, but I've never actually engaged in it, but I actually managed to pull it off and ended up not buying the thing.
Yeah.
So it's this slower pace, this willingness to wait or to say, maybe I need to pray or think about that a little bit or get some wise counsel first. Feels more natural at 50 than it did at 20.
For those listeners like myself who at times say, I don't have time to come back. You're heading in the wrong direction. And
that might be the problem.
And our culture is about impulse, that impulse buying. Prices are slashed and 3 days only.
That's the NT Wright thing about the next shallow novelty, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Before we take a break, I want to talk about just another part of this, SJ, is we have come to know through encouragement from some other teachers and we'll call them faculty members of our heart that showed us some years ago that the answer to all the questions is walk with God. We end every one of our retreat conferences, actually coming up in the new year. We've got an advance coming up in March, Lord willing.
Lord willing and the creek don't rise, as great
right.
sailors would say.
March 18th, and then the end of April, May 1st, is the next Heart of a Warrior encounter.
Yep.
But the end of those weekends, I'll just tell you, the answer to all the questions is to walk with God. I know from firsthand experience that's either frustrating or it's settling. Okay, I get it. This is how it works. And the more and more that I've learned how to walk with God 3 miles per hour, the more comforting that whole thing is, the whole idea of walking with God. And there's another side of that I'm ready to share from the stage or even from the microphone. Gosh, there's a very comforting phrase in We Shall See. Walk with God and we shall see. I don't have to fix my kids. I don't have to tell my wife what to think. I don't have to try to control the variables and the team members and God. If I do all that practice with others, there's no way you're not trying to do that with God and fit him in.
I would say there's no way you're not trying to be God.
In
a lot of ways, right? When you are trying to control that many things, there's a reason, A, that you're trying to control all those things, and it's probably some kind of woundedness that's motivating you to do that. I'm speaking generally here, not specifically about you, Michael. But, if that's your way of operating, there's something deeper going on there.
The world tells us, and you know this, yes, there are personal things that have invaded my life and my world and my story that can come into play there. I think the environment we're in is just as significant another variable where the pace of life, our computer phones, smartphones, all that they can bring you, all that you can look at in a few minutes, the kind of pace that we're invited to process, right? We grew up in the 70s where there were 3 channels and one was fuzzy.
Yeah, unless you stood there and held the antenna.
And now it's unlimited. And even now we're moving away from channels and into streaming. And it's a whole other different pace today. The kids today and the elders today, both sides, we're all in it. We're all in that pace. You were talking about the undercurrent of a river. That's what is actually over time steadily doing its work. The water levels rise and lower, but it's all the stuff that's going on in that undercurrent that's really significant. And it's where the quality of the water is.
Yeah.
So to have the ability to plunge the depths and to be living deeply with God and with others, it's going to take a little work. Some of it's just getting, like you said, how are you doing without your phone for a while? How are you doing as you dial down? This COVID took us all to that place, March, April, maybe March, April, May. And then we kind of were invited to come out of our holes, out of quarantine. But there was something about the days were different, a little longer.
Yeah.
Especially in the spring. Well, you couldn't move fast. The whole story just found a gear down.
Yeah. A little bit slower movement, no doubt.
Yeah. So SJ, let's take a break. When we come back, let's dive back into these themes and words that God's revealing to you and me, and maybe encourage our listeners to approach him for theirs.
Yeah. We'll be right back. Hey listeners, it's SJ. Just want to give you an update on upcoming events in 2021. The purpose of Zoe events is to create a safe space where men, women, and couples can encounter God, experience Him in wonderfully intimate ways, and enter into life-changing transformation. We want to invite you to get away with God, unplug from all the noise, the busyness, and the demands of everyday routine, and invite Jesus to take you through your story. The moments or seasons in your life that He wants to heal and restore in order to shape you more fully into who you truly are. That happens over and over again throughout the Bible. Regular folks encounter an incredible God, experience His love, and they are never the same. We have 3 events coming up in 2021. March 18th through the 21st is our Heart of a Warrior Allies Advanced Weekend. April 8th through the 11th is the Women's Deepening Weekend. And then April 29th through May 2nd is the Heart of a Warrior Encounter for Men. Visit zoe.org/events for more information.
Welcome back to the Exploring More podcast. SJ and I are talking about words for the year, themes for the year, direction for the year. What's God doing and has been doing? Listeners, if you feel like that's an overwhelming idea, I think SJ and I both, we would say, well, we'll look back over the last couple months. What's been going on?
Yeah.
The Kierkegaard quote. Let's look back. What's it feel like God's been doing? You may have to look at your Google Calendar. Where have you been? What's going on? Where are you getting life versus what's draining you?
I love that earlier in the episode you brought up this word slow that God's put on your heart for 2021. And when I think about that in combination with the book King Me coming out, and as I commented before the break, moving more slowly, it's a product of moving towards a certain number in regards to your age. But it's also a product of gaining some wisdom. And as you were talking about that, I was thinking about different movie clips where that is evidenced. And Mr. Miyagi is one of them. He's an older man who moves from the youthful perspective, is this old guy who moves slowly.
Yeah.
But he's really a master.
Yeah.
That's a repeating theme in movies, that the wisdom
the elder,
wisdom
the
is
sage.
found in moving slowly.
Yeah, and the elder and
Is
sage.
is why I wanted to bring that up, is what God is showing me is that you can not only find wisdom, but you have the opportunity to utilize the wisdom you already have, and that he's granted to you if you're willing to move a little more slowly.
Yeah, Gandalf sets the whole the whole fellowship down in the mines of Moria. He knows that a hurried decision could be perilous, could cost them, and it still goes pretty rough for them, but they're sitting there waiting for the answers to come, waiting for the invitation, the direction to come. I think it's like, how did you know this is the tunnel? It doesn't smell so bad down there.
It's not quite as bad. Yeah.
Think about Miyagi and the bonsai trees and the clipping, this meticulous work, the moving slowly in his training with Daniel. I mean, it's a great example, SJ, moving slowly. And Daniel misunderstands most of it until he doesn't. And he realizes that he's actually been learning karate. He's been learning something the whole time. And that is this beautiful moment we're talking about. You got to mention the Zorro.
Oh,
clip,
the training circles.
The training circle.
And you would, fighting bravely but dying quickly. Yeah. I mean, rushing into battle before you're trained, before you understand your opponent. That's a great example, too. Another great movie. You know, youth is not bad. We're not saying that, but there is just a perspective that comes with a certain distance that you've traveled.
Yeah. Anthony Hopkins, who plays the older Zorro, says to Antonio Banderas, who's Alejandro in the Mask of Zorro film, I don't know, almost 20 years ago now, but he actually provokes him to anger so he can teach him never attack in anger. Slow. Slow. So it's one of those things I'm looking forward to if I can, and also one of those things that I believe I've tasted.
Oh, yeah.
I know that redemptive community, redemptive brotherhood, this fellowship with God. Yes, my apprenticeship will continue with Jesus, and yet I want to be in a gear that I can hear more, I can see more, feel more, and understand more. And maybe it not take quite so long to step into that training circle and learn the skills of the kingdom. And I mean it like that. Listeners, learn the skills of the kingdom.
No question. I mean, maybe it won't take quite so long like it did for Daniel or like it did for Alejandro. And we've all experienced this, Michael. There's times where we were being trained and we didn't know we were being trained. And what I think you're proposing is if we can move a little more slowly and a little more intentionally, the gap between the time that we are receiving the training and we recognize that it was training can be shorter.
Yeah, I mentioned The Sound of Music. You know, she's teaching them the Do, Re, Mi song. And those kids are picking it up pretty quick. You know, pretty soon they find themselves all about Austria, you know, singing and doing the musical. I love that, SJ, I'm going to just give it the churchy term of sanctification. I am becoming like Jesus. That's what God is doing. The Father is at work and wants me to be at work alongside him in the redemptive story, the recrafting and the reclaiming of me. Parts of my heart that were lost, stolen, assaulted, that have had an effect on me are indeed part of his schedule that I don't fully know or understand yet. And yet, I know the enemy's out there. He's at work trying to lure me back. The very things I've gotten freedom from in the last 15 years, that doesn't mean that I am immune or in some ways not vulnerable to their attack again. It's just paying attention and knowing that I live in a battle, I live in a war, I live in a spiritual war zone, and the enemy is at work, is trying to accomplish everything that they can to keep me from experiencing intimacy with God and walking in the glory that he has entrusted to me. That's so much of what King Me is about, kind of exposing that, inviting men particularly up and into that. But I love what you said about wisdom. It's hard-earned, but it's not earned if you waste your pain. It's hard-earned. Most wisdom is gained from, don't do that anymore. That doesn't go well. And then you find that space that you actually learned as a kingdom skill. And if you want to list listeners of the kingdom skills, just go to the fruit of the Spirit, Galatians 5.
Yeah.
That's what he's wanting to cultivate in you. so that others can experience that from you. And as a representative of the kingdom, the goodness of God will follow you all the days of your life.
Yeah, that list of the fruits of the Spirit is one of those ones where you read it and you're like, yeah, I want some of that. Yeah, long suffering, sure.
Yeah.
Peace, patience, kindness, joy, all of those things. I want some of that. And then I start to think about the last time I was in a situation where I could have been patient and wasn't.
Right.
So then I feel like, man, do I really want those things? Okay. When the rubber hits the road, what does that mean for me in my life? And approaching things from that perspective, it can be hard. It can be difficult. There's no question about it, but there is wisdom to be gained there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then to talk about it, like you're saying, the elders, the sages, the good kings, even young hearts, when they've encountered and experienced God working in them and on them, those are great stories. We love to get into those stories, hear how God is providing, how God is training, as well as what is it that God's putting his fingers on to bring healing. And to get to those points, typically life is unfolding, SJ. And like you said, you're either being unsettled or being provoked, or actually you're seeing someone who at one time used to provoke you, but now there's some empathy, there's some sensitivity, there's a way to see them that you couldn't see them before. That's when you know something's being accomplished. Whenever there's that, that used to really hack me off when he would say that or she would do that.
Yeah.
But you realize they're in the story too. They're in the process too, whether they're engaged in collaborating with God or not, but they're in your life for a reason, or they wouldn't be in your life.
Right. Oh my gosh.
What is God up to when you think about all those variables and all of those things that are at work that he can use or partner with to invite you to either healing or training? It's one of those two categories.
Yeah.
Always.
Yeah. So let's turn, as we start our descent here, Michael, to landing the plane on this episode. I want to turn towards one of the scriptures that was shared in this short video, Godspeed. It's from Jeremiah 6:16. And when it comes to wisdom and it comes to moving more slowly, this really resonated with me. And I see it in your notes too. So I want to hear what you had to say about it. But stand at the crossroads and look. Ask for the ancient path. Ask where the good way is and walk in it. How often are we at a crossroads? Pretty frequently in our lives, honestly. Whether it's you're at the crossroad of a major decision, like whether or not to get married or to try to get pregnant or to buy a house, pick a major decision, or what might seem like a minor decision. I am going to choose or not choose to watch this next thing on my phone. Talk to or not talk to this person that I probably shouldn't be engaging in conversation. Whatever those things might seem like minor things, they're actually all pretty much major crossroads in the spiritual realm. And so when I think about standing at the crossroads and look, ask for the ancient path. I want to know the ancient path to walk on, the path that the ancients have walked on, the path that's been laid out before I ever got to this crossroad. And sometimes that ancient path is not easy to see. And so that's where wisdom guidance comes in. And then also ask where the good way is and walk in it. Not hop on your motorcycle and take off at 100 miles an hour. No, walk on the good way and on the ancient path. And I'm going to try to do more of that in 2021.
Somewhere the ancient path has to be related to another passage where I've set before you life and death. Choose life. If we can get back to a place where we have choices, that's that pondering. That's that place of slowing down, asking God questions. It really is another way to pray.
Sure.
But it's a great way to pray, asking him questions, inviting him to reveal, to show what it is that he wants you to see. I believe that as we come out of this COVID space, as we see the days and weeks come that, vaccines and different protocols are coming, I believe what's really coming is a swelling of hope, a deeper desire to connect again. Because when you have something taken away, there may never be that normal again or that way again. But when you have something taken away, right, it's what swells our appreciation for what's coming and the hope of being able to travel again, being able to visit, being able to see our family in hospital rooms
Mm-hmm.
and our elderly grandparents or great-grandparents in their facilities, in their retirement spaces. I mean, so many things that I think we're longing and hopeful for. Some people to go back to work. There's been talk of maybe we'll never go back to work. Maybe we'll become a Zoom culture. I'm not betting on that one.
No.
Our water coolers are far more valuable now without them than we might have thought when we had them. Going out to eat, hosting a dinner, and not wondering, is everybody okay? Is everybody safe? Have they been safe? Questions that we've had to deal with that hopefully will fade away. Regardless of what your word, themes, or direction for 2021 are, I guarantee you they're all for intimacy, oneness, and connectedness with God and each other, because that's the kingdom way.
Yeah. That's what God's desire is for all of us.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
1 John 2:14. I'm going to add to your Jeremiah 6:16. And Jeremiah was a prophet in some tough times. And Israel had some tough things, said to them. And yet God made good on the promise that new hearts of stone would be traded in. And Ezekiel and Jeremiah, that he was going to do a work inside. So John writes in 1 John 2:14, I write to you, dear children, because you know the Father. I write to you, fathers, because you know him who is from the beginning. And I write to you, young men, because you are strong, and the word of God lives in you, and you have overcome the evil one. 2020, like 2021, is going to have its evil days. Ephesians 5, be careful how you walk, not as unwise men, but as wise, making the most of every opportunity, because the days are evil. That passage is relevant like it was in the first century when Paul wrote it, as it is in the 2021. And so our encouragement, I hope that we can do podcasts that would impart courage. I hope we can do podcasts that SJ would invite people to the depths of intimacy with God and deep friendships with each other in redemptive community. I know we're going to talk about the Rendezvous Project, that new resource. We're going to talk more about King Me and YouVersion devotionals and just things that we want to post to encourage our audience to stand at the crossroads, ask for the ancient ways, right? The ancient paths, and ask where the good way is and walk in it. Welcome to 2021, friends. Walk with God and we shall see.
That's right. Intimacy, oneness, connectedness with him is what we want to encourage and promote. Listeners, if you, again, are interested in sharing your thoughts on this podcast or any previous podcast, email us at exploringmore@zoe.org. We'd love to hear from you. And if you would also leave us a rate and review on the podcast platform of your choice, it helps people to find us, help us get the word out about this message of life and freedom. So
we'll see you next time on the Exploring More podcast. We hope you have enjoyed this episode of Exploring More. The landing page for this podcast is zoe.org/podcast. That's ZOWEH.org/podcast, where you can find the show notes and various platforms to which we broadcast. You can also find us and the Life of More by visiting Zoe on YouVersion Bible app, Right Now Media, our Facebook page, and Zoe on Instagram and Twitter. Remember, with God there is always more, and you were made for more.